Hello and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns and I'm really excited to be here with you as I am every single day. Yesterday we talked about empathy, right? And we talked about how feeling another, and noticing another is, kind of opens us up to a sense of connection to each other, right? And that's really, really a very important thing because, our lives, as I said yesterday, do rely on connection with others, right? Whether it's a simple connection of, going to the store and interacting with people who you need to facilitate you, purchasing something that you need, right? Or it's the loving connection that we have with our spouses, our partners, our friends, our children, our siblings, our parents, whatever level of interaction, connection that you're talking about, right? But life is built on these kind of connections, right? And so when we feel empathy, what we're feeling is a connection on a visceral level, right? In other words, when I feel empathy for you, I feel you inside me, right? And I feel the pain and the suffering, or the good feelings that you have, I feel them in my body, right? And that's what empathy is. And what this does is this opens up to something that is really, really powerful. One of the most common things that I wind up talking to every client I have about is compassion. It's become such a huge part of my work. I know I mention it all the time in these videos and all my, messages that I put out there, that in my opinion, living with presence, which is to say being here right now, right? Accepting what it is that's happening right now, and allowing ourselves to be compassionate with what it is that we're going through, and to allow compassion to lead us, and keeping an open curiosity, right? These are, as we're going through this, right, these are, to me, the sort of four pillars of living in a way that is not only for our well-being, and for our happiness, but is also in a way that we can actually show up to life, right? We can be open to what is happening to us. We can interact with those people around us and those experiences in a full and positive way. And when we can interact with things in a full and positive way, well, then what happens is we get more joy and pleasure out of the good things, the happy and exciting things that are happening in our lives. And then we tend to not feel the negative aspects of our lives, the things that cause us pain and suffering. We don't feel them as strongly. We're able to get past those a lot quicker and actually enjoy the pleasurable times in our lives, right? And so compassion, I believe, plays a huge role in this, right? And I've talked about this before, and pardon me for repeating myself. I can't help it, because compassion is really that important, right? Because compassion itself, right? Empathy and the compassion that it leads to are present and are accepting and are curious, right? So really, in a very real way, compassion alone can be enough for us to realize the sense of well-being, the sense of happiness, the sense of fulfillment, the sense of healthiness that we're craving in our lives. And that's what we're really here to live, right? We're here to live happily and in well-being and in satisfaction and fulfillment and a sense of purpose, right? That's what we're here for, in my opinion anyway, right? I mean, who really knows, right? But it feels like that's what we're here for. We're not here just to suffer. We're not here just to get through this life and just survive till the end and have enough money to retire and kind of sit around for the last few years of our life. I don't think that's what we're here for. We're here to really interact with this life and to really live this life. And to do that, right, we need to be here with it. Right? And again, when we practice empathy and the compassion that empathy leads to, then it's necessary for us to be present, right? Like, you can't help it, right? Because what is presence? A lot of times when I first start teaching people how to live in mindfulness, and now what I'm shifting to is living in heartfulness, right, which is really about the compassion. But anyway, if you're talking about mindfulness, right, you're talking about paying attention to what is happening as it's happening, and so I often tell people in the very beginning, it's a really helpful thing to just kind of get to know your outer senses, right? Because here's the thing, if you are listening to something that is happening right now, right? And if you are seeing something that is right here in front of you, right? Or you're smelling something, or you're touching something, or you're tasting something, right? Then these things are happening in the present moment, right? You cannot use one of your sensory organs to experience something that is not here. Right? You can remember something you heard, as much as your memory can be trusted, which it can't really that well, but you can have a memory of something that you heard, or you can have an imagination of something that you might hear, see, touch, taste, or smell, right? But in order to actually be engaged in that sensory organ, it has to be right here, right now. So anytime that you are engaged in your sensory organs, then you are grounding yourself into the present moment. And that's a great thing for all of you out there who are sort of getting into this mindfulness, heartfulness exercises, to just get to know, get into the habit of paying attention to your senses, right? So closing your eyes and listening to what you hear. It's a fantastic way to sort of introduce yourself to the mindfulness practices, right? But again, if you are, contemplating someone's suffering, right? That's what compassion is, right? Compassion comes from the Latin. The word compassion comes from the Latin words, a Latin phrase, cum passus, right? Or compare, I should say. Compare is to suffer with. Right, so when you're practicing compassion, right, and you're contemplating compassion, what you're doing is you're contemplating the suffering of another, and the suffering is something also that is happening presently. And certainly when you feel empathy, right, you're necessarily in the present moment, because the person for whom you're feeling this empathy is right here, right? Like we're feeling your pain right now. And right now, I am going to work to ease that suffering for you. Right? That's what compassion is. And empathy is a very, very strong way to get to it. Now, even by a matter of logistics, right? Like in order to practice compassion, and this includes compassion for oneself, which has been shown in exhaustive studies to be one of the most beneficial things we can do, is to practice compassion for ourselves, right? But whether it's compassion for ourselves or compassion for another, right, we need to first notice that suffering, right? Like that's the first step to wanting to, if you want to suffer with someone in the terms of compassion, which really means to stand with them in their suffering so that you can support them through their suffering, which is ultimately to wish for the end of their suffering, right? If you're going to do that, right, you first have to notice their suffering. And that's the empathy, right? And when we sense that, when I sense your pain in my body, well, then I am suffering with you, right? And so it's such a fluid, natural thing that happens. It's really, really beautiful, right? And so this is how, but in a certain way, even practicing empathy becomes an act of compassion. It becomes a place where the line just gets erased in a way. Now, of course, there is a physiological thing that's happening between empathy and compassion. It's actually really interesting that empathy in your brain is happening in the fear center of your brain, right? Just like anything else, any other stress that you might be feeling, it's originating in that fear center, that emotional center of your brain, right? Because you're afraid for you're feeling someone's pain, and it triggers a fear in you. Right? Now, of course, this is going to induce the stress response, which is why there's something called empathic stress fatigue. right? Which is to say that the more empathy you feel for someone, the more you're engaging in that stress response in your body, because remember, you're feeling their pain in your body, and the idea is that that scares you, right? And it feels like you're under attack because you're feeling this level of pain, right? Or this level of suffering, right? And if you keep it on that level, then that's something that is going to get very exhausting, because there's only so much of that that your body can take, which again is no different from any other level of chronic stress, right? In the sense of how it impacts the fatigue level of your body, right? But there's something really interesting, that when you can transfer that empathy, just noticing someone's pain, to actively considering and contemplating standing with them in that pain, and reducing and relieving that pain and that suffering. Well, what happens then, really interestingly, is that the brain activity moves from that emotional, that limbic area of your brain, which is sort of in the mid level of your brain, and it moves up into the cortex of your brain, right? Which is where you're thinking about things, which is where you're in control of things. You're no longer afraid. You're intentional, and you're conscious about things, right? And that, of course, is the practice of mindfulness. Again, that part of our brain working more than that emotional part, right? Because we're in control of this, right? It's what we call top-down regulation, right? We're in control of the thinking part of our brain. We're not in control of the emotional brain. In fact, the emotional brain is in control of us. So when we do flip that empathy into compassion, then it's a thing where it goes from something that is going to hurt you, that is going to cause a fatigue and an eventual burnout and a damage that gets done to you. And this is something that's very, very common for caregivers, not only professional caregivers, but actually more specifically people who are not trained, right? Even though, of course, the medical industry has been trying to train people in compassion for the last few years. It's a very big deal. But I'm talking more about the people who have a sick relative at home, right? Or the parents of a child who, pardon me, has a very special needs kind of situation, right? Like, those are the things where, that causes a burnout, right? Unless, again, we can transform it from empathy into compassion, which kind of, rests in a completely different part of your brain. And that brings me back to, we can consider, and this is a helpful practice in and of itself, we can consider the empathy that we're feeling someone as an act of compassion. Right? And that is something that's going to be very beneficial to you to get into the habit of. And what I mean by that, right, is, I told you yesterday, I said a brief story yesterday about how, I was having a difficulty, in my family. It was like my wife and I were having a little bit of a disagreement, let's say, let's put it that way. And it becomes something where it's like, okay, I'm feeling her pain, and I'm seeing that okay, the reason why she's, whatever she's doing, right, whatever action she's taking that I feel is harmful to me, I'm seeing past the harm that it's doing to me, and I'm seeing that it's coming from a place of suffering on her part. In other words, I'm allowing myself to feel what she's feeling, right? Now, here's what happens, right? When somebody feels that you are feeling them, there's a lot of feels here, right? When somebody feels that you are feeling them, well, then they feel good, right? That feels really good to have somebody, engaging and identifying with your own suffering, right? It really, really feels good. Right? Because, and this is part of, when we're suffering, and we're suffering in isolation, which is part of suffering, actually. Most of the time, when I could ask you, when you're in a normal sort of state of homeostasis, and say, hey, is there anybody in the world who never has a difficult time in their life? Logically, of course, you would say, no, of course not. Everybody has difficulty in their life, right? But yet, when we're going through the difficulty, right? We have this tendency, this psychological switch gets thrown where we have this tendency to feel as though we're the only ones who could possibly be going through this that we're going through right now, right? We're the only ones who could possibly be so foolish to do this thing that we did. We're the only person who could be so unlucky to have this thing happen to them. We're the only person who could be so cruel to have done something to someone else, right? But of course, these are not true, because like I asked you when before you were hurt and before you were in a place of emotional trigger and stress, you readily admitted that no, of course, there's nobody on earth who lives free from suffering, right? And free from making mistakes and free from having difficulties in their lives, right? There's nobody, right? But yet when we're in that place, we're thinking that we are the only one. And so therefore, when you encounter somebody who is in a place of, and this can be whether it's a small child, maybe your children or your nieces or nephews or friends' kids, right? Or your spouse, your partner, or friends or colleagues or whomever, right? Even somebody who you might be just talking to on the bus on the way home. Once you sense that somebody is in a place of anger or doing something or saying something that seems aggressive or maybe they seem depressed or they seem sad or they seem whatever, right? As soon as you sense that, of course, when people seem sad or depressed, it's easy to see that it's coming from a place of suffering. But when you see somebody in anger and aggression, that too is always coming from a place of suffering, a place of damage, a place of great pain, right? And so once you can connect with that pain and you can say, you can see in that person that the reason why you're being so rude to me is because of the pain you're feeling, right? And you can let that person know. Now it doesn't have to be in words, right? Like, because that's the thing, like even just asking questions of someone, like, hey, is there something going on? Do you want to tell me about something? Because it seems like you're really having a hard time, right? Doing that automatically, even the person doesn't talk to you about their problems, automatically they feel something, right? And so that is an act of compassion. And so that's where the line between empathy and compassion become very, very blurry and almost disappear at times, right? And so there's a great story that I want to tell you, and I've shared this here before, so pardon me if you've heard it before, but Tara Brach, one of the great teachers of this work and someone who's written a few really amazing books and does great talks, great guided meditations. Tara Brach, B-R-A-C-H is her name, PhD, psychologist, also a very, very established mindfulness practice, a Buddhist. She's traveled, lived in ashrams and she's the real deal, She has this story where she says, imagine that you're walking through the woods and all of a sudden you come around a tree or whatever and you come upon a dog, right, that's snarling at you. This dog is baring its fangs, its hairs are sticking up, and it's in this body position that just tells you it's about to attack you, right? And so the first thing you're going to feel is an immense fear, right, in the sense of survival, like, oh my gosh, this dog is about to hurt me. So now I have to do something, now I'm in this fear place, right, where I'm thinking about how am I going to survive this dog attacking me, right? And now imagine, though, as you're standing there in this sense of fear and in this sort of, inert and paralytic kind of, place where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm about to be attacked, you notice that the dog's leg, his hind leg, is caught in a trap. Right, and you can see the teeth of this trap digging into the dog's leg, and you can sense how much pain this dog is going through. And now you realize that the anger and the aggression and this threatening posture that this dog is showing you is coming from this place of deep pain and extraordinary fear. Right? Like, think about it. If your leg was stuck in a trap, what would you be feeling? How afraid would you be? How much pain would you be feeling? Right? And so when you realize that, that all of this aggressive, nature of this dog is coming from this place of deep fear, what changes in you, right? You go from this place of being afraid for yourself to now, oh my gosh, how can I help this dog? If I can just help this dog to be free from this trap that is causing it so much pain, so much suffering, so much fear, well, then it won't want to hurt me anymore, right? And so the same is true with your loved ones, right? If you're, so last night, my wife and I made a point of just, I said, I'm here to listen. And she says, well, I don't want to talk to you because, I'm a coach. So I'm always coming up with solutions. I'm always kind of turning it around on people. It's not something I mean to do. It's just like, that's who I am, And she was like, well, I don't want you to tell me how to get over this, right? Because I'm just hurting. And I said, I understand that. And I'm making the commitment to just listen to you. And I did. And halfway through the conversation, as she started feeling better, she looked at me and she says, it's got to be killing you to just be listening and not saying anything. And I was like, yes, it is, but I'm doing it. And that's what I promised you I was doing, and I'm here for you to do it, right? And so just holding that space and recognizing the pain that my wife was going through, that in and of itself was an act of compassion. And more appropriately, more accurately, it's an act of self-compassion as well, right? Because if I can make this person who is my wife and my partner, the mother of my children, the person with whom I share everything, if I can make her feel heard, then she is going to ultimately not hurt me, right? So it is compassion for her too, but it's also compassion for me. And in that sense, and that's where I really have this, again, that's where heartfulness comes out for me, right? Because to me, compassion is a 360-degree cycle that happens, right? Because if I am good to you, right? If I try to help you to relieve your suffering, then you are going to be kind to me. You're not going to want to hurt me. And therefore, we are going to share this energetic, which is empathic, right? Again, that's what we call that. It's empathic resonance, right? Where I feel you and you feel me. There's a resonance that's happening. Just like if you strum the guitars, the strings on one guitar in this part of the room, the guitar that might be in this part of the room is going to vibrate with the same frequency because it's a resonance that's happening between them. The same thing is happening between two people, right? And so therefore, by helping you, I am helping myself. And by helping myself, I am helping you. And therefore, we can create this constant and beautiful cycle that just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And when we're doing that, right, we are, empathy and is curiosity, right? Like if I'm going to engage in empathy for how you're feeling, then that requires an open and curious approach to what you're going through, right? It is also very present because if I am, engaged, again, as I said before, if I'm engaged in your suffering is happening now. Right? It's not like I'm calling somebody up and saying, hey, remember, 5 years ago when you went through that car accident, I hope you're, I want you to be relieved of that suffering. The person would be like, that was 5 years ago, dude. I'm not suffering from that anymore. Like, I'm healed. Like, I'm physically healed. Yeah, I have nightmares sometimes, whatever, but that's then, right? You can't relieve my suffering that I had 5 years ago. Relieve the suffering that I have now. Relieve my nightmares that I have, the memories I have, the guilt that I have of the person that got hurt in that accident. That's what's happening now, right? So it is very much a presence. And of course, when we're in a place of empathy, we are in a place of acceptance, right? So my point is that even though I talk here about many different modalities of practice, right, to keep ourselves present, accepting, compassionate, and curious, right? There's many different types of practices I go over here. Technically, the only practice that we really need is compassion, right? Compassion for ourselves and compassion for everyone else. And this will breed a natural empathy because, again, it's going to be curious because I need to see your pain before I can relieve it, right? And so that is why I'm going to suggest some very, very simple practices for you, okay? That you just, there's a few phrases. If you want a copy of this, the video is getting kind of long, so I'm not going to take the time to explain this right now. But if you're looking for a very simple practice, okay, just email me and I will send it to you in writing, okay? It's just a matter of first talking to yourself with kindness, okay? Just there's 6 different phrases that you repeat to yourself and you for a couple of weeks, and you get yourself talking to yourself with compassion and noticing your own suffering and wanting to relieve that suffering, right? And it just comes through this very simple practice. And then we turn it outward and we picture people in our lives. We picture first people who we really love. It's very easy to practice compassion towards. Then someone who's neutral, who is, just kind of, neither here nor there, not good, not bad. And then we go to someone for whom it is very difficult to express compassion, okay? People who've done great things wrong to us or to others in the world, okay? Criminals, killers, dictators. We can feel compassion to all of them. And I will argue, or I will convince you, if you give me the chance, that feeling compassion for those people, or rather drawing a line and refusing compassion to those people, is actually hurting yourself. So you're taking away the self-compassion. So now you've broken that loop, right? And so now it's no longer working the same way. And it's not that hard to do. Trust me, it's really not. It's a very mechanical practice. You do it a few times a day for a few minutes at a time, and before long, it changes your whole life. And so if you would like these practices, I am more than happy to share them with you. So contact me and let me know that you want them, and I will email you a document right away. And so now is when I tell you, thank you for listening, and please do all of the YouTube things. Please do all of the podcast things, right? So the like, the share, the comment, the subscribe, hit that subscribe button, and then the ding, the little bell so you can tell when I'm putting out new content. Because sometimes it is late, so it's not a certain time of every day. I know my email, when I looked at my computer at like midnight and I realized my email still hadn't gone out. It was like on the screen that said send now. I was like, oh no. So so you can get a little thing that says when I post new content. And then on the podcast, just rate and review. Just give me whatever rating you feel is appropriate. And if you could say a few words about this podcast, it will certainly help the algorithm and certainly help these videos and podcasts to get in front of more people. And that means that I can help more people. And that is my goal, because I live in compassion, and it fuels me and it heals me and it makes me happy, and it's what I need, and it's what they need too. So that's that loop, So yeah, and if you would like to talk about this more, then please, I'm more than happy to sit and talk with you and to really get into this with you. So just reach out. And then lastly, if you're interested in supporting me without becoming a client of my coaching program, but just supporting me with a few bucks a month, it would really be appreciated. So you can do that through Patreon, okay? Just I always say this and I never do it, but I'll post a link in the comments of the YouTube video to join my Patreon, okay? So thank you very much, everybody. Wish you well, and I'll be back in tomorrow to talk about, I think we might talk about forgiveness tomorrow, because the thing about this compassion stuff is that people start to think, well, it sounds soft, and it sounds, it sounds like, it's gonna make me soft and wimpy, and I'm not that. I need to be tough on myself. So I'm going to talk to you about, forgiveness, and maybe even a little bit more self-compassion tomorrow too, to show you how that is not at all true. All right, everybody. Wishing you well. Be back in tomorrow. Have a great day. Take care.